It was a cold December night in South Carolina when 20-year-old Heather Elvis vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned near a boat landing, but there was no sign of Heather. What happened to her? Today, we unravel the haunting mystery of Heather Elvis. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I tell true crime stories with the utmost care and respect for the victims. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps me continue bringing these important stories to you. Now, settle in, and let's begin. Heather Elvis was a vibrant 20-year-old with big dreams and an even bigger personality, growing up in picturesque Horry County, South Carolina, and the famous Myrtle Beach. Heather was the eldest daughter of Terry and Debbie Elvis, a close-knit family where love and support were the foundation of their lives. Heather shared a particularly strong connection with her dad, exchanging daily text messages. After graduating from St. James High School in 2011, Heather's independent spirit led her to move out of her family home and into an apartment with her best friend Brianna Warland. Her parents fully supported her decision, proud of her determination to carve her own path. Heather worked tirelessly as a waitress at the Tilted Kilt, a Scottish-themed restaurant in Myrtle Beach, while pursuing her dream of becoming a professional makeup artist. By the summer of 2013, Heather's studies were going well, and she was thriving in her new environment. But a chance encounter at work would soon set off a chain of events that no one could have foreseen. One warm June day, while working her shift at the Tilted Kilt, Heather crossed paths with 37-year-old Sydney Moorer, a local maintenance worker and father of three. Their meeting seemed ordinary at first, but Heather was immediately drawn to him. Her social media posts hinted at her growing infatuation with tweets like, "I've got a taste for men who are older." Sydney, flattered by the attention, began frequenting the restaurant more often, bringing Heather coffee and bagels and chatting with her whenever he could. As the summer progressed, their interactions became the subject of whispers among Heather's co-workers. Some teased her about her apparent crush on Sydney, who was a married man. Despite the rumors and judgment, Heather's feelings for Sydney seemed to deepen. Her social media posts became more suggestive, hinting at a relationship that may have gone beyond innocent flirtation. By August, Sydney's visits to the Tilted Kilt had become more frequent, and their connection was hard to ignore. Heather's coworkers noticed the pair's growing closeness, and some even played pranks, pretending to be Sydney's wife Tammy, in phone calls to the restaurant. Heather's life took a darker turn as her relationship with Sydney Moorer deepened. Sydney, a married father of three, began visiting Heather at her workplace, often waiting in his vehicle for her to finish her shift. Their connection became more open, with Sydney even discussing plans to employ Heather as a nanny for his children if he and his wife moved to Florida. Heather shared this with her friends, who found the idea unsettling given the nature of their relationship. The affair was a whirlwind of secrecy and emotional highs and lows. Sydney frequently confided in Heather about his unhappiness in his marriage, promising to leave his wife, a promise he never fulfilled. Heather's friends warned her that Sydney might be stringing her along, but her feelings for him were undeniable. By September 2013, the strain of their clandestine relationship began to weigh heavily on Heather. On September 20th, she posted a cryptic tweet, "Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love." It did not end well. It seemed Heather was trying to distance herself from the affair. However, the situation escalated when Sydney's wife, Tammy Moorer, discovered the relationship. Tammy confronted Heather over the phone, belittling her and accusing her of being nothing more than a fling for Sydney. Tammy's anger was palpable, and she forced Sydney to speak to Heather, during which he cruelly dismissed her, leaving Heather devastated. Tammy's rage didn't stop there. She launched a relentless campaign of harassment against Heather, calling her workplace repeatedly and even sending explicit photos and videos of herself with Sydney. Heather, heartbroken and terrified, tried to regain control of her life. She sought solace in her faith, attending church with her best friend Brianna. But Tammy's threats continued, with messages warning Heather to reveal her location or face dire consequences. Exhausted and desperate, Heather replied, "I think you're a little obsessed with me. I'm nobody you need to worry about anymore." By late November, Heather's life seemed to take a turn for the better. Sydney and Tammy embarked on a 3-week road trip with their children, giving Heather a brief reprieve from Tammy's harassment. During this time, Heather secured her dream job as a makeup artist at a beauty salon, offering her a glimmer of hope for a fresh start. Her elation was shared with friends and family as she finally felt like life was taking a turn for the better. However, beneath this joy, Heather carried a heavy burden, one that she feared could escalate the already tense situation with Sydney and Tammy Moore. In early November, Heather and her co-workers at the Tilted Kilt began noticing changes in her appearance. She had gained weight rapidly, and her concern grew that she might be pregnant with Sydney's child. Terrified and unsure of what to do, Heather confided in her manager Jessica Cook and decided to take a pregnancy test at work. To her frustration, the test result came back as an error, leaving her with no clear answer. Heather's best friend later confirmed that during this time, Heather had not been intimate with anyone but Sydney. Despite her worries, Heather's optimism prevailed. She resolved to move forward and leave her painful past behind. Heather began opening herself up to new possibilities, and in mid-December, she agreed to go on a first date with Steve Geraldi, a man she had recently met. On the evening of December 17th, Heather and Steve spent the day enjoying Myrtle Beach's festive Christmas illuminations. The two then drove to a nearby parking lot, where Steve taught Heather how to drive a manual transmission. Thrilled by her newfound skill, Heather sent a smiling photo to her father and best friend with the caption, "Just learned to drive stick. I'm a pro." Steve later recalled their date fondly, mentioning they had planned to meet again. He dropped Heather off at her apartment in Carolina Forest around 1:15 a.m. However, at 1:45 a.m., Heather's best friend Brianna received a distressing phone call. Heather, sobbing and hysterical, revealed that Sydney had contacted her from an unfamiliar number. She said Sydney claimed to have left his wife and apologized, expressing a desire to be with her. Alarmed, Brianna urged Heather not to get drawn back into his life, reminding her of how far she had come. The friends ended their conversation with a promise to talk the next morning. The following day, December 19th, police were called to investigate an abandoned vehicle at Peachtree Landing, a secluded riverside spot 8 miles from Myrtle Beach. The green Dodge Intrepid, parked haphazardly on the deserted road, was registered to Terry Elvis, Heather's father. Officers knocked on Terry's door to notify him of the car's discovery. Unable to reach Heather by phone, a concerned Terry accompanied the officers to the scene. At first, he suspected the car might have been stolen, but upon unlocking the vehicle and finding no sign of Heather's belongings, her purse, phone, or keys, his worry deepened. Terry's fears grew as calls to Heather's phone went unanswered. Visits to her workplace confirmed she wasn't scheduled to work that day. "This is totally out of the ordinary," he recalled. "Heather's never done anything like this before. Something's wrong." Despite the lack of physical evidence, no broken glass, no signs of struggle, the Horry County Police Department launched a missing persons case. Volunteers and officers searched tirelessly, while divers combed the waters near Peachtree Landing. Human remains were discovered nearby, but analysis revealed they belonged to a male, leaving investigators with no leads. Detectives began retracing Heather's movements on December 17th and 18th. Steve Geraldi, her date, was questioned but quickly cleared of suspicion. Heather's co-workers at the Tilted Kilt expressed their heartbreak, keeping her name on the schedule as a tribute to her memory. As Heather's loved ones made emotional pleas for information, Tammy Moore, Sydney's wife, took to social media to continue her campaign of harassment. Her posts were filled with vitriol, targeting Heather even after her disappearance. On December 20th, police brought Sydney in for questioning, tipped off by Heather's roommate and co-workers about the affair. Sydney denied any involvement, claiming he had been with Tammy that night, engaging in public acts they had recorded on their phones. Detectives, however, suspected he was lying. The investigation took a crucial turn when Heather's phone records revealed a call from a public payphone in Myrtle Beach on the morning of December 18th. Security footage captured someone using the payphone at the exact time the call was made. Initially, Sydney denied making the call, but under pressure, he admitted to contacting Heather. "I asked her to please leave me alone," he confessed. As the investigation deepened, detectives brought Tammy Moorer in for questioning. Calm, yet deflective, Tammy described her marriage as unconventional but denied any involvement in Heather's disappearance. "We had an open marriage, and I didn't care if he was with other women," Tammy said, dismissing the affair as meaningless. However, her remarks about Heather were harsh, portraying her in a negative light based on Tammy's own judgments. Detectives, following their suspicions, reviewed surveillance footage from local businesses and uncovered critical evidence. Shortly before the phone call to Heather, Sydney was seen on security cameras purchasing a pregnancy test from a Walmart. When questioned, he insisted the test was not for Heather but rather for his wife Tammy, a claim that raised eyebrows among investigators. Their findings didn't end there. Footage from cameras along the isolated road to Peachtree Landing revealed a dark Ford truck, matching the description of Sydney's vehicle, heading toward the landing at 3:36 a.m. on December 18th. The same truck was recorded leaving the area just 10 minutes later. Experts later confirmed the vehicle to be a 100% match to Sydney's truck. The evidence was damning. Sydney had not only been in the area but, investigators believed, was the last person to see Heather alive. Using Heather's phone records, detectives pieced together a chilling timeline of her final movements. At 2:30 a.m., Heather attempted to call the payphone that Sydney had used to contact her but received no answer. Her phone then moved to a location near her apartment, lingered briefly, and made its way to Augusta Plantation Drive. Over the next hour, her phone returned to her apartment, made a series of calls to Sydney, one of which resulted in a 4-minute conversation, and eventually traveled to Peachtree Landing. At 3:37 a.m., Heather's phone made 3 unanswered calls to Sydney before it was switched off at 3:42 a.m. This timeline aligned eerily with surveillance footage showing Sydney's truck heading to and from the landing. For investigators, the parallels were impossible to ignore. A search of the Moorers' home unearthed further suspicions. On December 20th, Sydney and Tammy had replaced their home surveillance system, installing new cameras the very next day. Although investigators couldn't access the original system, the new cameras revealed troubling footage. Sydney and Tammy were recorded meticulously cleaning the truck's passenger side and burning the rags they had used, actions captured on the day they installed the new cameras. The community, meanwhile, continued to rally around Heather's family. A prayer vigil was held at Peachtree Landing, where her car had been found nearly 2 weeks earlier. Her family, overwhelmed with grief, begged for anyone with information to come forward. Heather's family remained steadfast in their efforts to keep her memory alive and the search for answers ongoing. They organized a fundraiser to rebuild a community garden at Peachtree Landing, where Heather's car had been found. The garden would be adorned with rocks sold during the event on Heather's birthday, June 30th. Proceeds were dedicated to the Q Center for Missing Persons, a cause close to their hearts. In February 2014, after months of anguish, a breakthrough finally came. Sydney and Tammy Moorer were arrested in connection with Heather's disappearance. The couple faced charges of kidnapping and, despite the absence of a body, were also charged with murder. For Heather's family, the arrests brought a mix of emotions. "I want to feel happy about it, but there's no joy in it. Heather's still not home," her father Terry Elvis said. As the Moorers sat in custody, police worked tirelessly to build their case. However, despite their efforts, the murder charges were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence. While this was a disappointment for Heather's family, her mother Debbie admitted feeling some relief at not having to endure the details of a murder trial. They hoped the dropped charges might encourage others to come forward with information. With the murder charges dismissed, Sydney and Tammy were released on bail while awaiting trial for kidnapping. Despite a gag order, the couple took to social media to proclaim their innocence, claiming they had been framed. Sydney even gave a televised interview expressing frustration over the accusations and the toll they had taken on his life. "It's not a game. It never has been," he said, insisting he would not confess to something he didn't do. Sydney's defiance, however, led to consequences. His failure to comply with the gag order resulted in a 5-month jail sentence for contempt of court. Tammy, too, publicly lamented their situation, claiming they were being unfairly vilified by their community. Years passed, and in 2017, Sydney was convicted of obstruction of justice and sentenced to 10 years in prison. By 2019, the long-awaited trial for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis began, drawing significant media attention. It had been 6 years since Heather was last seen, and the courtroom was filled with emotion as witness testimonies and evidence were presented. The trial marked a pivotal moment in the search for justice for Heather. After a 6-year journey through the legal system, justice finally caught up to Sydney and Tammy Moore. In 2019, both were found guilty of kidnapping Heather Elvis and sentenced to 30 years in prison for each charge to be served concurrently. The verdict came after less than 2 hours of jury deliberation, bringing a measure of accountability, but no true resolution. Throughout the trial, Sydney maintained his innocence, telling the court, "If I could give them closure, I would. I have children of my own, I get it, but there's just nothing I can give." For Heather's family, the moment was bittersweet.
And Terry put his hands on my shoulders and he said, "Now what?" And I said, "Exactly. Because this is over, but we still haven't found Heather." And it's like I was telling the judge, there has to be something more. There has to be something more that we can hold over their head to make them talk. There's got to be some kind of an incentive. It was so hard to walk out of the courtroom knowing that that might be the last time we get to do anything in that way. And it's scary.
Well, when he spoke to the judge, he said, "I'd like to give them closure, but I can't." And I think completely differently. I don't think he can because he can't admit it. He didn't say there's nothing that I can give him. He said, "I can't."
What is the next step if it's not court? How do we press on? How do we find her? How do we keep people looking and talking?
To this day, Heather's body has never been found. In their enduring grief, the Elvis family dedicates themselves to keeping Heather's memory alive and advocating for other missing persons. Each year, on June 30th, Heather's birthday, they organize efforts to spread missing persons flyers around their community, hoping to remind people of Heather's story and encourage anyone with information to come forward. Heather's mother, Debbie Elvis, remains steadfast in her resolve, saying, "Persistence is key. I will never stop searching, not just for Heather, but for all missing people who deserve to be found." Debbie's words reflect the profound pain of not knowing. As a mother, you ache to hold your child again. You think about what you could have done differently, what you could have said. The not knowing, being unable to care for your child in any capacity, is unbearable. Heather's story reminds us of the importance of keeping missing persons cases in the public eye, ensuring that they are never forgotten. Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps spread awareness and keeps these cases alive. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe and look after your loved ones.